All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone, to East Bay Charter Township's Planning Commission meeting. We'll begin this evening with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you'd like to join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And if we could get a roll call, please.
Present. Present. Richardson.
Here.
Gonzalez.
Here.
Ferguson.
Here.
Edley. Here. And Leonard.
Here. Next up on the agenda is review for a conflict of interest. Anyone have anything to declare for any of the items below? Okay, hearing none. On the agenda, staff did bring up we are under the gun in terms of actually identifying who's going to be the chair, vice chair, and secretary. So I'd like to amend the agenda to add under number 9. We'll just put it under D so we can get all the normal business out of the way first. And then if we could do that, I would make a motion to add appointment of the chair, vice chair, and secretary to the agenda.
Support.
Thank you. So motion by the chair, seconded by Mindy for addition to the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Next up is approval of the meeting minutes from August 20th, 2024, the special meeting. Anything we need to discuss?
Yeah, one item.
Okay.
Under the approval of the minutes for August 7, 2024, regular meeting and site visit, if we could put in that both I moved and Ed Renee seconded to approve the 2 site visits and the regular meeting. That was the site visit to the Park Shore vacation and the Life Point Bible Church.
Thank you for that. Any other corrections or alterations? If not, I would entertain a motion.
And I'll move to approve the minutes of the meeting of August 20th, 2024, the special planning commission meeting.
Support.
Sounds good. We have a motion by Paul, seconded by Rhonda for approval of the August 20th, 2024 meeting minutes with the approved changes prior spoken by Paul. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Next up is public comment. Feel free, anyone who'd like. I have 3 minutes at the lectern. Come on up and we can have a little conversation.
Good evening. Robert Parker here on behalf of Real Estado and Protect Forest Lakes. Just had a couple of comments wanted to make with regard to your consideration of possible amendments to the transient activities and business ordinance. I don't know if the commission's been shared our correspondence. Okay, so that kind of outlines, provides the backstory of, kind of why we've asked for a review of this ordinance. In our experience, recently this spring, the ordinance was used to effectively, we think, effectively repeal or amend certain provisions of the site plan approval. Many of you were probably not on the Planning Commission in June of 2021, maybe some of you were, but the Planning Commission at that time approved an amended site plan submitted by Lakemore Resort on Arbutus Lake, and the approval was subject to a number of conditions that the applicant had to meet. This spring, that same applicant applied to the township for a permit under the Transient Activities and Business Ordinance. And one of the things I requested is that the township, as part of that issuance of that permit, basically waive one of the requirements of that site plan approval. And we think this was an improper utilization of the ordinance. I don't know what the purpose of the ordinance was specifically, but I don't think it was meant for a property owner to basically avoid or negate conditions of a site plan approval that had been issued by the Planning Commission. In this case, it was specifically the 630 boat limitation. They were asking for a waiver of that so they could have a photo shoot on a weekend at the site, and that was specifically prohibited, the extension beyond 630 by the site plan approval of the Planning Commission. So we proposed some amendments to the ordinance, which we thought would address that. I think you've been provided with those. It occurs to me also, the amendment may be just as simple as provided in the ordinance that these types of permits will not be issued in the Lakes Area District or the districts where you have a forest lakes overlay. By its name, it's a business ordinance, and these are predominantly residential districts, and it just seems to me that these types of permits being issued in your residential districts is not really what the drafters of the ordinance had in mind, and probably a misuse of the ordinance in those circumstances. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments, Robert. Good evening.
Good evening. Gail and Dave Mason, Wilsey Road, East Bay Township. My husband and I are here because we were presented about a month ago with a violation of ordinance because we are allowing camping on our property. And according to your ordinance, you have to have 40 acres to do that. We have 7.7. The area that we have allowed campers on is smaller than the footprint of our home and outbuildings. So it's a relatively small amount of our almost 8 acres. We're not rich people here requesting to build some huge structure, tear down, or cut down any trees or tear anything down. We just want to use the property that we own in the way we see fit. We'd just like to make a little extra money so we can get out of here once in a while, go on vacation, see our kids, none of whom live in the area. In our travels in the last couple days, we have seen several places where it's quite obvious people are camping in front of their homes. These are all visible from the road, visible from the neighbors' homes, and it's everything from one very large motor home hooked up to water and electric, well, electric for sure, I'm not sure about the water, with lots of vehicles around it. It is on a building site, but I don't believe it's a builder's vehicle. It's not a tool crib by any means. It's a big, massive motorhome. There's another area where there's a trailer parked in a driveway. All the shades are pulled, the slides are out, and it's plugged into electricity and probably water. Another one we saw has multiple campers and multiple tents on the property, obviously being lived in. They've been there for quite some time, as we were told by friends who live in the area. All of these places are viewable as you're driving by. They can all be seen by the neighbors. Ours you could see as you're driving by, but none of our neighbors can see anything. And I guess my question is, if these other people have been given an exception to the ordinance, then we need an exception also. You can't just pick and choose who you give exceptions to. If they applied for something, then we want to apply for the same thing. Not allowing our family or ourselves to camp on our own property, I think is unreasonable, and a lot of people, the last 2 meetings we've been to, were in agreement with that. We currently have family that are living there. They've been there for 2 months. They're working in Traverse City, and if they can't stay with us, they have to leave. They have to forfeit their jobs, and they have to leave because they can't afford the outrageous rents, hotels, whatever that Traverse City has. Last meeting, Claire mentioned that she went to other townships and to see what their ordinances were pertaining to this, to the camping specifically, I think it was. And that was great. I would ask, though, that you look at townships and villages that have the same type of demographic as East Bay Township has. We're not Old Mission Peninsula. We don't have many mansions. We don't have many castles. We don't have multi-gazillion-dollar properties that, people are paying tons and tons of taxes on. We're paying a lot of taxes, but not like them. So we're not comparable, in my opinion. I think we're very comparable to Long Lake Township. I used to live out there. I'm very familiar with the layout of Long Lake Township. And I would suggest maybe Green Lake Township, Blair Township. They all have similar low-density residential areas, and with the exception of the hotel district, which doesn't fit anybody's mold, in my opinion. It's totally different and needs to be looked at totally different from property owners and residential people such as us. I would suggest that your ordinance either be amended or just scratched out completely. Let the homeowners associations, subdivisions, places where the density is high and where there is likely to be complaints about this sort of thing, let them police their own. If they have a problem, they go to their HOA and complain about it, and the HOA handles it. We have no
Just-
HOA where we live.
If you wouldn't mind, we're just
Yep.
getting at the end.
Okay, and in regards to our camp, I don't see it's over there.
It's okay.
I don't see, in regards to our campground, it's not really a campground. It's letting people put up their tent or park their camper in our backyard. They're not using our septic system. If we have to go to the state and get licensed by the state, we are more than happy to do that. But we want your blessing. We want to be amicable.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Evening.
Evening.
My name is Jeff Geiger, Cross Country Trail, East Bay Township. I'm also concerned about the restrictive ordinance on the camping. We're on about 11 acres and been there about 40 years, been here since the early 60s. And this is an area where people come to recreate. Everybody camps. I've had a bird's eye view for 30-some years of this area like nobody else has. And I realize what people are doing, and so I think that the ordinance should kind of coincide with what is required or what's utilized by people here and what's been utilized for so long. Somebody mentioned there, East Bay is different here than a lot of other places, similar to Long Lake, Green Lake, and such. I think it needs to be a less restrictive ordinance. I do believe that camping, some should be allowed. Everybody's doing it. Just because there's a cord going there doesn't necessarily mean they're living in it either. An RV, if you've got it out there, you keep things running. You keep your house batteries charged, things like that. Maybe keep your fridge going, keep the mice out, whatever you're doing. Hard and very restrictive to put that on the law enforcement, to go banging on people's doors and, hey, is the guy in there, sleeping, or is he just working on his place, or whoever? That's been going on for a long time. Shouldn't be too restrictive. Maybe, consider a number of days per year. A lot of places popping up, and they find the need for it. Paradise Ranch, other places have done 6 months of camping. And you can leave your vehicle in your barn. I'd love to put mine in the barn, but I can't get another permit because my RV doesn't fit in my current barn. I don't have enough room, even though we have 3 acres, or 3 parcels totaling about 11 acres. It's kind of, unless I do a glamp or something, it's difficult. So the restrictions put on us are very hard already. And the enforcement's going to be difficult. We're already between a commercial riding stable and a bed and breakfast. They all operate fine there. Everybody, we smell a little manure. There's a lot of events, you'll see a lot of people's vehicles there, and they're there with their horses. I don't expect them to go to a hotel. I expect them to probably be where their horses are. And so that needs to be addressed. It definitely needs to be lightened up. Don't want people living there full-time. Don't want unsanitary conditions. I think a lot of that's addressed already by soil erosion, et cetera, health department. But yeah, I think it's a good thing for the county, the township. All the county does it, we shouldn't be excluded. We already have a lot of limitations here, but appreciate what you do. Thank you.
Thank you for the time.
Hi, I'm Susan Ham. I live in the Pine Grove subdivision in East Bay Township. The main reason I'm here is I heard about the possibility of new homes, new apartments and some being built on 3 Mile Road, just south of the Industry Park. And my worry is there's such a large complex off of 3 Mile Road and the condition 3 Mile Road is in, and the high traffic on 3 Mile Road is not very safe. And I'm hoping that something is done to make that a safer position instead of having a large amount of traffic added to a large traffic volume of that road. Because I do travel on that road occasionally, and it is not safe, in my opinion. I know that I was told that, 3 Mile was supposed to have been worked on this year, and it was not. And I know next year it's supposed to be Town Line, and then that intersection of 3 Mile and 31. And then I was told 3 Mile was going to be done next year. And if they start working on that new apartments over there, it's going to be a mess. So I'm hoping you consider that when you do this with this apartment complex. You can take that into consideration.
Sounds good. Thank you. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. Okay, we'll close the public comment and come back to correspondence. Claire, anything new we need to be updated on?
Nope, have not received any additional correspondence since, and did want to, yeah, I guess, from the correspondence, I think the updated policy for planning, for all the boards and commissions to just be consistent, is that all correspondence that's received from the public is automatically distributed to planning commissioners to review. If for some reason you don't receive it, if it only goes to staff, then it will be emailed to you, but won't necessarily be included in the packet, just because a lot of times our correspondence comes in after the packet goes out. And so just to have that continuity is the process that we're planning to move forward with. Okay, that was all. So I've got reports, but that's all
Sounds
I've
good.
got for correspondence.
Sounds good. Under reports, we'll move down to Township Board with Mindy.
So we had 2 additions of staff at the last meeting. The first is a part-time groundskeeper. Susan LaRose is going to work on the township property itself here. And we have a special projects coordinator. Sam LaSusa has been hired full-time. He's the former CEDAM fellow, so I'm taking away Killer's steam here. We also talked about the zoning ordinance, but we talked about that at our special meeting. And then we spent most of our time on the emergency services budget, as the whole budgeting process for the township is coming in the near term, and we have to redo the emergency services budgets.
Sounds good. Thank you. Any questions from Mindy? All right, Paul, anything from ZBA?
No, we had no meeting.
That's easy. Back to Claire, planning and zoning.
Okay. So I did want to just for the sake of the public as well as planning commissioners, we are planning to revisit the temporary dwelling provisions in this winter. So I think the public comment that we've received has been really helpful. I think the discussion that the Planning Commission has had over the last several months, as well as Township Board, and we will continue to research other communities and bring some additional information to help support that policy discussion this winter. Did also want to just update the Planning Commission on the septic ordinance. So I know that that's a high priority that was included in the master plan. It's a complex issue. Staff has been in conversations with Grand Traverse County Health Department, county officials, as well as local environmental groups. We've been met with the Watershed Center a few times on this ordinance. We are planning to have Grand Traverse County Health Department offered to provide just a presentation to Planning Commission, just to provide kind of an overview, policy options, update on the statewide septic code and kind of where they're at with that. And so we in talking with Beth, we decided that it would be a really good joint meeting, so I think it would be beneficial for Township Board as well as Planning Commission to both hear from that. Reason being is this would be a police power or general law ordinance as opposed to part of the zoning ordinance. So just wanted to let you know that we haven't forgotten about that and are looking for early winter to hold a joint meeting and have both boards review and discuss that.
Nice.
And then last thing, just wanted to put in a plug for the Redevelopment Ready Communities Virtual Academy. I sent out an email about that, but if anyone's interested, I know that we've had a number of local officials in East Bay over the last several years that have participated. It's an hour and a half once a week, starting in mid-October, and I think it's helpful because it provides a lot of best practices, examples of what's being done in other communities, and kind of helps you get a better feel for what the redevelopment ready process is and what benefits it can have to the community. So I've had good conversations with some of our other board members that have taken the training.
It's thrilling.
Dan can speak to it.
You'll see a familiar face somewhere along the line.
So that's all that I've got.
All right. Any questions for Claire? All right, moving right into new business for the Planning Commission. First up is the Crimson Multifamily Sketch Plan Review. Claire, you want to kick it off and just kind of set the table
Yep,
for
and
us?
we've got the applicant here tonight, but this is a 20-acre parcel of land located off 3 Mile Road. It's zoned high-density residential, which is a use permitted by right, or multifamily is a use permitted by right. The proposed development would consist of 10 three-story buildings with 24 units each, so that would be a total of 24 units. That would be 12 units per acre, which is right now in our draft zoning ordinance what our density is going up to. So the workforce housing is, from my understanding, what they are interested in, and so they would likely be seeking tax incentives after Planning Commission approval. Number of amenities, I'm sure the applicant will speak in more detail, but walking paths, bike trails, dog parks, clubhouse. I will mention that this will come under the new zoning ordinance, so we will have new standards in place that will be applicable to this development, including updated wetland setback, more specific vegetative buffer requirements, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, sidewalk requirements, landscaping and buffer requirements. So that will all fall under the new ordinance and some of those changes. So the applicant tonight is looking for preliminary comments from the Planning Commission. I know one area specifically that they are looking to discuss and get some feedback on is the access and the connections between that property. So if you look on aerial imagery, or if you're familiar with that site, it'd be accessed just through 3 Mile. But they're also looking at making another connection off the Meadowlands Industrial Park. And also looking at future connections just to make sure that this parcel would be the surrounding area is also zoned high-density residential. So just making sure that there's connections in place for future development and making sure that future parcels can also meet our zoning ordinance requirements of having 2 access connections for multifamily developments.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Any questions of Claire? And if not, someone from the applicant crew is here. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, just give us a little more insight.
Sure. My name is Steve Calverley. I'm the CEO of Crimson Development, the organization who's would like to provide this workforce housing community. First of all, I really appreciate you setting us up for the site plan review. That's something that we haven't experienced with other planning commissions. So it's really nice to be able to understand up front. Obviously, our goal is to make this a win-win situation, and so understanding that and addressing the concerns up front is very helpful to us. Obviously, we don't want to do business where we're not wanted, so we want to make sure we're wanted. So, as Claire mentioned, we've been working with Doug Mansfield on the land plan for a while. And Claire, I don't know if you can tell me, I think he was taking into consideration the new ordinances with a lot of the setbacks.
He was,
that he had.
yep,
So I think
yep.
that's already been factored in. One of the questions that we had, right now, the site plan you show has an entrance, a shared entrance off a 3 Mile Road. It would come into our community and then an easement to connect for a future possible road through the northern parcel. We also have access to the south, as was mentioned, into the business park. And then we also have access on the northwest corner of the property, and it's right where there's a creek crossing there that is needed to access the west parcel. And that little stub would give access to both the west parcel and the north parcel when it's developed. So I guess our question was, is the shared entrance off a 3 Mile, really necessary? And I ask that because I know that Bill Klaus, the land seller, has another entry point or easement that comes up 3 Mile Road, off 3 Mile Road north of us, and then traverses through that northern parcel to the crossing, to the creek crossing. And our concern is that if there's an entrance off, shared entrance off our entrance and one on the northwest, when it gets developed eventually, that would kind of lead to believe that a lot of the traffic coming from the west and northern parcels, specifically the west parcel, and traverse through our property to get out the entrance on 3 Mile Road. And our biggest concern, not that we're not unfriendly, I don't want people coming through our community, we're just more concerned about safety, because that could be a lot of traffic, and worried about the safety of the children and the pets and the people walking through the community, and kind of a security issue. We like to, we have one of our amenities is going to be a dog park, so we're very specifically ask our residents to register their dog. We know who they are, and we know who they belong to, and they have to sign, some agreements in terms of how they'll conduct themselves while in the dog park, taking into consideration other people and other dogs. And if that road kind of becomes perceived as a public road, there may be a lot of people coming in there using the dog park that and then we're concerned about security. If one of their dogs attacks another dog or an individual, who's liable for that? With our residents, we know because we have written understanding, written agreement. So those are our concerns, and I'm just wondering if the ordinance calls for access to future northern property and a western property, I would think that the access to the northwest would accommodate that, and that's for future roads. Who knows how long and if that'll be built. We're just concerned about kind of creating the perception of a high traffic pass through the community, and so I didn't know what I haven't seen the ordinance, so I don't know what the specific requirements are, but if there's any flexibility on that, it would be most helpful for us. But other than that, I'm sure there's probably a lot of questions, and I'm here to answer any I can.
Sounds good. I've got a few, but if anybody else wants to go. Questions to the applicant?
Have you talked to the road commission at all about 3 Mile and their plans?
We haven't. Doug Mansfield has talked to him. In fact, when I did talk to the road commissioner, it was a while back, and told him what our plans were, and he said, you might want to, if this project's going to go through, you might want to get a hold of us and have us build your entranceway while we're doing the road. He said that would make the most sense, and then we know it complies with the standards of the road commission, and we didn't have to worry about, trying to hire somebody else to understand it. And it would certainly seem to make sense and probably be more cost-effective to have them do it while they're doing the road. So that's the conversation we've had up to this point, but nothing beyond that.
Tied to the, Claire had mentioned that you're looking at this as a workforce development or workforce housing kind of project.
Right.
Can you kind of speak to, or who's leading you guys through that path? Is that something you're pursuing through the county BRA, or what does that look like?
We'd be working with Mac McClellan,
Okay.
the local brownfield consultant. In fact, he was at our initial meeting, so he kind of we haven't talked to him in quite a while, because until we get approval to move forward, there's not much he can do.
Right.
But that's who we will engage to represent us in that endeavor, so.
So are you looking at utilizing infrastructure, and for what duration are you looking to income restrict, and what target area median income are you looking at?
It's workforce housing, as you probably know, is a term used for, rents that fall within 80 to 120% of the local area median income. So we've run the calculations. Of course, we don't have final numbers yet because we haven't completed a budget. They're all estimates. Until we get an actual budget, we'll know. But we know that our rents we've done a project very similar to this in Greenville, Michigan. It was our first workforce housing project, and that's all we're focused on now because that's where the demand seems to be, that's where the need seems to be, and in today's environment, as everybody knows, with interest rates and labor and material inflation, you can't make anything pencil out anymore unless you get some type of assistance, and workforce housing is a vehicle that allows a new project to work for us, and more importantly, for the tenants to keep their rents at a level that can't be achieved without it. And we commit to staying at those 80 to 120% of the local area median income for the life of the project. It's not just for a number of years. Obviously the AMI increases typically over time, and so we don't anticipate having any problem staying within that.
Gotcha. Do you have any conceptual elevations, and here's where I'm going with this. I don't know the site other than driving by it 100 times. It's a pretty regular thoroughfare. Oh, you do have some.
Yeah, I can circulate these.
That'd be very helpful.
We have to share one. I think I brought five or six of them.
Thank you.
As I said, we
Pass them down for you.
we have built this product in Greenville, Michigan, with 116 units, and they have the exact same floor plans. Their exterior colors were a little different. We kind of let the local municipality tell us what they prefer. In that particular location, it was more of an urban type structure where there were some, greens and muted reds. It was a little more colorful, and we anticipate that up here, our opinion would be that this isn't a site for that. This is more of this is Traverse City, the lakes, the water, and the blue and gray combination we thought would be better received, but we're wide open. But this is our conceptual elevation.
Sure.
When it gets down to it, if different colors are preferred, we'll accommodate whatever your preference is.
Yeah, I wasn't so much worried too much about the color. What I wanted to just more or less have a dialogue about was the amount of parking on site, just given, you're required to have it, and I completely understand that you're gonna build to your market need. The question that I've got is, we get snow up here, at least we used to, and none of this has covered parking to any extent whatsoever, and I was just curious if there was an opportunity to maybe put some of this under the structure, and build it into the product.
These are on slabs, and of course, going underneath, not only is it very expensive, but then you hit water tables, and you got all those issues to worry about. But we are planning, I think your ordinance requires 1.5 spaces per unit.
Yeah, the updated ordinance will be a minimum of, I think, 0.75 spaces per unit. So you could have, under the new ordinance, it would be a range of 180 spaces to 480. So quite a bit of flexibility
we
there.
typically, we know from doing this before, because these are 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, and oftentimes with workforce housing, you'll get roommates. You get 2 bartenders or 2 waitresses or 2 police officers or whoever it is that, will take a 2-bedroom unit and share it, or a husband and wife that are partners that have 2 cars. So anywhere where we've built, we found that the magic number is about 1.65 to 1.7 per unit. So I think the last time we looked at this, we thought we'd be right around 400 parking spaces, and probably half of those would be under carports, again, to address the snow issue. and then people will have the opportunity to, for a small monthly fee, take a carport if they choose to, or just take an open space if they choose not to. And a big part of our design is to create open space for snow push, so there's plenty of room to plow snow and to clear it as well.
Yeah, because to me, we have some of this product, and I think what we've done a pretty creative job with is trying to diversify the income levels that are built within there. So all of these being the exact same product on the entirety of the site, I mean, makes sense economically, but it is going to all be the same style, same look, same everything, unless you have other...
Same look. Exterior would be the same look, but the interior, as I said, they're 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms, so it addresses all different types of economic, if you can only afford a 1 bedroom or only want a 1 bedroom, or if you want to take on a roommate, we've got some cases where there's, a 3 bedroom and 3 unrelated people living there, so.
Sure.
That's what we've discovered through our experience with workforce housing, that, we do everything we can do to keep it affordable and keep it within the defined workforce housing range, but the tenants can get more creative to keep their costs down even lower than that.
Sure. Yeah, just trying to brainstorm. It's just a nice way to kind of break it up so it doesn't all look to be exactly the same throughout the entirety of the site, but financially, yeah, you'd offer different products, and in theory, income restricts some heavier than others, or not restrict all of it, but that's at your leisure. Any other feedback from any of the commissioners?
I just have a question. Have you spoken to the 3 neighbors in the southeast corner that kind of L's around there?
We haven't. We plan to, but we didn't want to do that before we knew we had a project to talk to them about.
Okay.
So, yeah, we want to be good neighbors, and anytime we build anywhere, that's a big part of it, and making them understand what we're doing and listening to their concerns and addressing them wherever we can, so.
Okay.
Andy?
I see a small dog park and a large dog park, but I don't see a people park.
There's actually, this is our clubhouse here. So we've got some green space here. What we do is we have grilling stations throughout the community. And, they're put in places away from buildings, so people can walk to them and grill. They're on a cement pad with a picnic table. So I'm not sure how many we've got planned here yet. We're kind of waiting to see what the final plans are, but it's typically, for that many units, I'm guessing it'd probably be no less than a half a dozen, that they're shaking their head. Glenn, our VP of Construction, and Kevin, our Vice President of Operations, is here, so I want to get their consensus. They're closer in the weeds on this stuff than I am sometimes in terms of exact numbers, so.
What about a kid's playground?
There is going to be a playground, and I think it was drawn in on the site at one time.
I don't have my glasses today,
Okay.
so.
I didn't see one.
Though.
It's intended to go back in that space behind the clubhouse. That way, when people come to the clubhouse is, it's a combination of our leasing offices are within there. There's a community room that can be used for event spaces as well, baby showers, birthday parties. There's a full fitness room, 24-hour fitness room that they can access. A package room, which has become big these days. A package room, and then we also have a mail kiosk that goes up against that building as well. So that's kind of the center of activity, and then typically the playground, the child's playground, is out behind the clubhouse. So the fitness center's in the back of the building. If parents want to come work out where they're watching their kids on the playground, and there'll be an access door to get in and out of there as well, so.
But just the one by the clubhouse, there's not another one?
Yeah, that'll be the only playground.
Okay.
The rest of the public spaces will be, other than the green space and the walking trails, will be the grilling stations
Okay.
where they can gather.
And are you going to have those back here too, or not?
We can't do anything back there.
'Cause you're in the wetland setback?
Yeah, that's the wetland buffer right there, so we can't do anything. So they typically are probably gonna be along here, or out in this area here. We can sometimes we put them, between the buildings. And the dog park, depending on where this, where our access points need to be. If it needs to be, if we need to maintain this one coming off of here, coming off the entranceway, then more than likely, we'll relocate, we may even relocate the dog park. Doug drew it up with a small large dog park right across the street from each other. Oftentimes, we put them both in one location and have the little dog park within the big dog park with their own separate entrances, so it's all one big dog park and not two separate areas. We try to keep them as far away from the buildings as we can, so.
On the idea of gathering spaces, do you have any provision, I haven't seen this, if it is, please point it out, any provision located within the complex, I would think there'd be a couple of them, for the kids to gather, for the school buses to pick them up?
We would accommodate whatever the school will accommodate. Sometimes, some communities where we build, they don't want to drive into the community, they made them meet out front. Sometimes they come, we prefer them to come into the community, and we'll set up a bus stop wherever they prefer to have it. So we just need to, once we know we're on the right track and moving forward, then we'll obviously meet with the school district and find out how they plan on picking the kids up and what they'd like to see, So
Okay, yeah.
we'll accommodate what works best for them. Like I said, we've got a project where they come right through the community, and the turning spaces are enough to get them in and out of there, and we pick a spot within the community centrally located where they all meet. And if the schools here are willing to do that, that would certainly be our preference, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, looking at the drawing here, it's a rather large space, and it would seem like it'd be a long walk between, back by, building number 8 or whatever that is, up to 3 Mile to be picked up. So it would seem that somewhere in that discussion, and of course, this is future, you may want to provide for something like
If
that.
they're willing to come in the community, obviously, the most convenient space would be along as you're coming into the community and meandering around the clubhouse, and then you've got that long stretch that runs parallel to the north property line.
Yeah,
Somewhere along there,
yeah. I would see a couple of locations.
yeah, because, that way it's kind of an equal distance walk from all the buildings for the most part. But, yeah, we're wide open to whatever works best for the school district, so, and for yourselves.
Regarding future, I guess, access or connectivity, looking at the site, obviously the lot to the north, it gets pretty wet, so it's like, without seeing a conceptual plan, it's hard to say, but you have a lot of space there on the north side, and it almost looks like you could take the parking for the clubhouse in building number 1 and flip that to the north and use the property to the south of those buildings as park to add a buffer between you and the neighbors. And then in talks with developers or the owners of those lots to the north and west, you could almost add a road and split that property line. And then that way, that would create almost like a bypass around your community, so you wouldn't have that heavy flow of traffic from the west coming through. I kind of drew it up just as a quick sketch, but it just seems like that would solve your, you already have this, so if you get in talks with a person from the west and the north, just have that road as a bypass, have an entrance into here, flip that, and then this is your park property, and it adds a nice buffer to the neighbors from the southeast.
Yeah, and we'd actually looked at that at one time, and there was some concern by Doug Mansfield that they weren't sure if they would take a road like that with only being able to utilize one side of it. He thought they'd want. But
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to get in agreements with the west and the north, but it would solve everyone funneling through your
Yeah,
property.
and that's what we looked at, was we just come across here and just have the whole road off the property, and the property line would be if it's a 66-foot right-of-way, that would be, 66 foot from the property line forward, and that way you can connect and come all the way around here.
Sure.
And, so that, that would certainly be an option.
Sure.
because I know, and I didn't know if you were aware of it, but
Hey, Steve, sorry to interrupt you. This is getting recorded, so we do need to
Okay.
just stick to the microphones.
currently owns the property to the north and to the west, does have another access point off a 3 Mile Road, a 66-foot easement that is north of us and meanders through that northern property and connects to the creek crossing. I can just hand it to you real quick. So he's already got a 66 road easement coming right across that kind of clips the top corner of our property. Sure. And so I thought, that's why I was asking if it's, my understanding is you can't have more than 2 access points on this stretch of property, north and south, off a 3 Mile Road. And so if he had ours and then he had his to the north, which would handle getting people, through his northern property and western property, and then we just tied in at the northwest corner so that our people would have access to the western property and the northern property, that might work as well. But your idea could work too, if it meets with everybody's.
Because this is a new parcel that's being created? Or is this, okay,
Yeah.
this is a proposed
Right, right.
property.
I do like the idea of, just to finish up my thought, sorry. I do like the idea of regardless of flipping the parking on the building number 1 and the clubhouse to the north, and then using that property between those buildings and the neighbors to the southeast as your park property to add a little bit more of a buffer, rather than that neighbor having parking right close to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
totally open to that. That's why we're here, to find out what you'd like, and there's pros and cons to everything. It's
Sure.
like Mr. Gonzalez said, he thought that the park should be a little more centrally located. This wouldn't be centrally located, but it would solve another problem, so.
What do you think, Brenda?
So when you're talking about connectivity on the northwest corner, you're talking about consideration for a bridge over Black Creek then, right?
Yeah, and I don't know this, Doug has represented to me that Bill has already acquired a permit to cross the creek at that point.
I believe through Eagle,
Yeah.
there has
Right,
been.
it'd have to be
yeah.
through Eagle, okay.
So I guess just from taking a look at the ordinance from the access connections, I do think that road, just hugging the property line, would definitely be a solution that could meet our ordinance requirements. I think that, we'd look at, if there's going to be another access point plus this one, we wouldn't necessarily consider it 2 access on that property, because this one would also be shared with your property as well. So I think it would be in total, it would be the same number of access points off a 3 Mile. So, I'd certainly want input from Road Commission and other agencies, but I think that would be a good thing to look at.
One of the questions I had too, because you're going down your list for site plan presentation, it talks about a traffic study. And I don't know how you do a traffic study with a shared entryway with a road that isn't built yet. How do you anticipate what might happen in the future?
The traffic engineers will be able to figure that
Yeah, I
out.
mean, it
But, yeah.
depends on who buys it, how many units they build.
Yeah, there's a lot of assumptions that would need to be made, but
Because I started thinking about that. When they do the traffic study, how do they know how to predict roads that aren't there yet?
in terms of whether or not this, the way it's drawn up right now, I would say from a zoning perspective, we wouldn't necessarily need the main entrance to go to the parcel to the north, because you're already providing access to the north parcel and the west parcel up further west. The only caveat would be if that parcel was divided in the future. So it's just kind of looking at, if this stays whole and that's all developed as one, then strictly from a zoning perspective, that would be acceptable, but it would be just kind of looking at how that parcel might develop in the future. Just want to mention a couple other items. One is that I did get a call from the Watershed Center, had taken a look at this. They were happy to see the wetland setbacks, the creek setback. They were curious just about the wetland delineation, I think had been done in like the early 2000s. And I guess I was just curious if that's something that would need to be redone. And the only reason I mention that is because I think you do have these buildings, it's particularly building number 8 is about, like, pretty close to exactly 25 feet from the wetland. So we just want to make sure we have updated information on that location.
I think I mean, we're obviously going to have to do, soil surveys and, wetland delineation update.
Okay.
Wouldn't be a problem. We'd want to have that too.
Okay, perfect. And then I will just mention the discussion with the bus stop, particularly Beta. I'm going to be meeting with Beta within the next few weeks to discuss a number of different upcoming developments. This is one of them, but just making sure that we're coordinating on stops. I think a pullout might be something that they would be interested in looking at. I know that Beta in the past has been hesitant to go into a development when they don't, it's all based on their ridership numbers. So if they have, consistent ridership numbers within that development, that makes it, worth their time, but it also adds to the schedule. So I think that'll be a helpful conversation. Also, just wanted to mention that TCAPS was super responsive when I reached out to them on the bus stop location for the Bayview, and are going to be picking kids up further back. And so they will certainly reach out to them as well with this.
Claire, do you know anything more about 3 Mile and the road commission? And
I think
mean,
they've pushed
the
it back a couple of
The condition is
years.
horrible there. I mean,
Yeah.
every year,
I th-
every winter it gets bouncy and bumpy and.
Yeah, I know they have
everybody's-
funding for it.
Okay.
And I think just in coordinating with other schedules, it was going to be, I think, 24, and then it got pushed to 25.
Okay.
I think they're looking at 26 at this point, but I would need to double check.
I mean, I know they have water issue, I mean, obviously, that's
Yeah.
why the road heaves in the wintertime,
Yeah.
but, I mean, it's a low point, but that's the main issue, is where does the water go and what do you do with it?
Yep. Okay.
So at this point, did I interpret that you might be willing to look at a site plan that doesn't have a shared entrance? Okay. Yeah, because like you said, you still have the access to the north and west right by the crossing there, and then obviously one to the south as well, so, thank you.
But I do think Stephen had a good suggestion with that, with the road entrance. Yeah.
Singular.
Yeah, I guess
I'll sign this and you can have it.
who would need to approve that, the road commission, or?
I mean, if it's a private road, the road commission would really be approving just the entrance.
Okay.
But we can, Wade Trim, our township engineer, would review it just to meet all the private road standards, which would be, probably regardless of where you placed it, so.
Okay. Good. Any other questions? I really appreciate your time and consideration, and hopefully we'll be back in not too long, probably not the next meeting, because you need the 30 days in advance to get on the agenda, and I'm sure it'll take us every bit of 30 days to,
Plus, we need to approve the zoning ordinance amendment.
pardon?
Plus, we have to approve the zoning ordinance amendment.
Right. Yeah, and obviously, if we're going to do wetland studies and traffic studies before we come back, we'll rush it, but that'll probably take 60 days or so, I would think, so.
When do you anticipate having a draft BRA plan?
Pardon?
When do you anticipate having a draft Brownfield Redevelopment Authority plan?
I'll have to talk to Mac, but what we'll do now, we've actually, I have our architectural firm and land planners who designed this product for us in the first place. So they're putting together a bid package right now based on, and we gave him Doug's layout. We'll revise that a little bit based on today's meeting. And then he'll be able to put out a bid pack saying, hey, here's the site, here's the utility layouts. and we can get probably within 60 days, get a complete bid, and then Matt can use that to inform his work. So that would I would think that would be, probably 90 days out, I would think, by the time they get all that done. I mean, we'll move as quickly as they can, but sometimes sometimes people doing these studies don't have the same urgency we do, so.
I get it. Well, thank you for your time this evening.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
We look forward to working with you in the future.
Yeah, same here.
All right, Claire, back to you on the transit activity ordinance policy discussion.
Okay, so in June, the Planning Commission reviewed correspondence regarding possible amendments to the transient activity ordinance. You decided to revisit the issue, look at impacts on surrounding land uses, and if there were standards that could be added or removed to the current ordinance to lessen the possible impacts of transient activities, which are also known as special events. So I found that most other townships or units of government call them special events. Perhaps we'd want to consider using that language to make it a little bit less confusing. So our ordinance was adopted in 2010. So some examples of what we consider to be transient activities in our ordinance include flea markets, festivals, carnivals, expos, peddling, entertainment, sporting events, temporary stands. Some examples that are not transient activities are farm stands, Christmas tree sales less than 30 days, garage sales, social gatherings such as family reunions or weddings that are held on private property that's a non-commercial property or public, like a park. So those are events that are not that are allowed, but that we wouldn't require a transient activity permit for. So there's, as was noted in the staff report, regulations in other communities are similar, but I did find that there were some helpful standards and elements of other ordinances that I think are worth taking a look at. I did talk with neighboring communities, also reviewed their ordinances, and talked with Township Legal Counsel. I have listed a number of different policy options that the Planning Commission could consider to lessen the impact on surrounding properties, and we can go into those in a little bit more detail, but some examples are consider requiring that special events provide some sort of a community benefit. For example, that could be a community benefit concert, a community race, a festival, the types of things that kind of, that provide community benefit. You could consider regulating low-impact and high-impact events separately. This was in talking with the city of Traverse City, recommended that. That's how they process events, which are mostly on public land, but, for example, events that sell alcohol include tents, have other large temporary structures. Those are like a large impact event. They would be reviewed and coordinated with outside agencies kind of more stringently than the lower intensity. We could consider adding some criteria for the appropriateness of the location. For example, access to county roads, adequate parking, access to emergency services, consideration of adjacent land uses. That was just one suggestion in talking with legal counsel. Wanted to just note, in Garfield Township, assembly is 300 or more. That triggers a special event. They did mention that they have very few special events in Garfield Township, but they do have an ordinance. In Peninsula Township, similarly, a gathering of at least 250 people is considered an event. In Acme Township, the number of attendees is based on the size of the parcel. So as the parcel gets larger, you can have increasingly more attendees, which is something to take a look at. We could consider limiting specifying in our ordinance how many special events a parcel can have, because you'll see when I went through the history of the last 3 years of special events, there are certain parcels that have had often more frequently. And this is really for, it's not a zoning ordinance, so it's really for kind of these special kind of extenuating circumstances. They're not to be, creating an event venue through this ordinance. So you'll see there's a table that I put together just summarizing the events that we've had in the past 3 years. So in 2022, we issued 12 permits for transient activities. In 2023, there were 8. In 2024, there's been 3 permits to date. Part of that was just our terrible winter, so we didn't get to have the Vasa and other events. I anticipate by the end of 2024, we'll probably have around 4 or 5 total events. So I think 2022 was a bit of an anomaly, and Camp Graylick, you'll see, took up a lot of those as they were kind of working through what their future was and what they were going to become. So I think what you'll see is more average is anywhere from like 5 to 8 transient permits per year for the township. We took a look back at the complaints associated with transient activity permits that we've issued over the years. The Lakemore boating was definitely one that we received number of concern and correspondence about the event and being approved. We didn't receive specific complaints about the effects of the event at the time, just as anecdotal information. The NIMBA, Northern Michigan Mountain Biking Association, their bike race in 2022, I know that we had some concerns just from a traffic perspective of bikes on the road. We received, I think, 2 correspondence about that and followed up with race directors and community police on that. And then Mount Holiday, there for the benefit concert, I know that there was one complaint about people parking on the road, which we followed up with Mount Holiday on. So pretty limited in terms of complaints, just, given some of the scale of some of the events, particularly Iceman and other events that have gone on. So I guess some of the questions that I'm looking for Planning Commission consideration on, I'm curious if the past events seem in line with the intent of the transient activity permit ordinance. Are there activities that you see listed here that seem inappropriate or incongruent with special events? Based on the types of events that have been approved, does it seem like there need to be changes to the ordinance and kind of looking for some big picture policy guidance, and then we would go back work with legal counsel to draft ordinance amendment?
Thank you for that. Any thoughts?
I just had a quick question. There was a public comment about the Lakemore photo shoot. Can you explain to me what that was? I'm sorry.
Sure, yeah.
Not familiar.
So my understanding, and I don't know much about, I don't know the details, but my understanding was that they were looking to do like a commercial, a photo shoot to market their property. So it was like and they were looking to allow more than the 3 pontoon boats to facilitate that commercial photo shoot. So our guidance from our legal counsel was to permit it as a transient activity permit. So
they
in the
did bring in
future,
additional boats?
yeah,
Okay.
yep. In the future, we could look at changes that whether or not that was appropriate, but that's how it was permitted in the past. And that's happened twice. It happened in 2022 and again in 2024.
Yeah, I see that June each time. Okay.
What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I read through all the different ordinances that you had provided, and there was some stuff in here that we don't have, and I thought was pretty good. I'd just like to run down some of these.
Yeah, thank you.
The only one, well, signage. We don't have anything that covers signage. And there is on Peninsula Township, on page 37, 41 by reference, some discussion about having the signage approved prior to, but more importantly, after the event is over, having it all picked up and taken away. That wasn't in there, but they had that, and I thought that was pretty good. The other item is having some proof that the property owner, if not the applicant, has signed off and allows the event to be on that property. I thought that was a good item to have. Garfield, on page 24, went into the issue about special consideration would be given to whomever to review if an event is less than 30 days. In other words, our requirement is that you have to have it 30 days prior to, but they have some provision, which is good language in there, that if in fact an event pops up and they need, in less than a 30-day period, they could come forth with some items. And the one thing I was thinking about is primarily political events. Sometimes they just drop on you, and they need to move quite quickly on that. I liked the issue, I guess it was page 26, I'm just referencing those, on the compliance to having proper water supplies and sanitary conditions. The other item is the protection of the property owners next to the event, and that was referenced on page 28. Excuse me, I don't have the... And then I like the idea of limiting the number of attendees allowed by property size. I think that made a lot of sense. And that was, I think it was Acme, but was page 34. And then two items was notification that the applicant would have to provide notification to the property owners within 300 feet that they are planning to have this event. So at least the neighbors would know all about that in advance. And as far as we don't have, and I didn't really see it to kind of reference it, but is about noise. What type of noise, decibel level, beat, and timing. Especially, as far as it affects the day, the date, and the people around them. And one item going back is also in the application, a requirement that the applicant would provide the approximate number of people that they would believe attending, as well as those people who would be there. Whether it be like a flea market or something like that, staffing, things like that. And those were some of the things that I picked up out of the different ordinances that I thought could be at least looked at and maybe included in our ordinance. So,
Great, thank you.
right.
In terms of the list of items that you had in there, like, nothing really jumped out at me as overly, I don't know, burdensome, other than learning, like, I'm just thinking back to my Peninsula Township experiences with Bay Shore. We learned a lot every year, and it kind of evolved. Some of that language that you picked out of was through some of those growing pains. And one of the things that, I think about in terms of the pop-up ones, like, I like the idea of it being some type of community benefit, meaning one thing that, and I'm selfishly going to take one example and run with it, and just give you a little history. So in the UP up in Gogebic County, there's a huge lake up there. It's hugely popular for sled drags, and they do a huge cancer benefit in the, late winter, early springtime, when there's ice. And it's this huge communal, benefit that goes on, and they donate money to a few different recreational groups as a piece of that. I think about that down in Spider Lake. It used to be hosted, they did sled drags there for a long time, and it brought a ton of different people. We haven't had ice in a few years. But if there was a way to kind of tie that in, I think it would be just embraced a little bit differently around the region, whether it be for bicycling, or whether it be for music, or whether it be for whatever, or even a photo shoot. I'm just trying to think of, like, that's kind of a neat way to, how we would enforce that, I guess, would be at the discretion of us, but,
You mean enforce whether it's a community benefit or not?
Yes.
Very subjective.
yes, like, I don't know what that looks like in terms of,
501(c)?
You know?
And who,
Some sort of a nonprofit status or something?
yeah, I mean, when I look at that list, I kind of see, I see a few, again, and some are personal to me. I ride Mud, Sweat, and Beers pretty regularly, and I know that they donate tons of money to Mount Holiday, which is close, you know.
Totally.
And I see a huge community benefit there. And, you know, and also when I look at this list, I see things like the Iceman and the Vasa, kind of, they pop out to me as opposed to a photo shoot or a wedding.
Sure.
So, you know, and I don't, but again, that's my opinion. I don't know how we would write that into something that, you know, a committee or Claire or Bill could, you know, approve a permit for or not.
Right. Must have been a big wedding.
Well, that was just at the time, those were anomalies, the wedding, those were all at Camp Grey Lick, and so at the time, we weren't allowing any activities at Camp Grey Lick, and so again, legal counsel, as they were working through the application process, advised us to issue those, to require a transient activity permit before. So generally, you'll see weddings at venues that are approved for a wedding. We
Sure.
don't have, we have not in the past had any applications for a wedding as a transient activity permit. So it's either a wedding venue that's a commercial use, or it's a private property that will, you know, occasionally you'll have a resident that will host a wedding.
Because that's kind of where I'm thinking in terms of like, I agree. I think a wedding and, you know, photo shoot are different than the rest of these, most of them, other than maybe the Christmas tree sales, but it being operated in a commercial aspect rather than like in a private setting. Like if Rhonda's going to host a bash of 300 people and it's on your property, then, you know, maybe that's appropriate. But if you're going to sell that tickets to your wedding, like that flies a little bit differently, right?
So Dan, to take off on your, you know, selfish little idea, you know, looking back at Spider Lake when they would always have those snowmobile races and such, I mean, that's an environmentally sensitive area. The amount of gas and oil that potentially could be spilled, sleds going through the ice. I mean, the trail's right in front of my house, so I see it and I know what the activity is. You're right, we haven't had ice to do any of that in quite a long time, probably 3 or 4 years. But that, to me, is an environmentally sensitive area, so that concerns me. And then Lakemore, having them, and Lakemore has been a challenge, I'll just say that. Having them bring in more boats, I just don't know that we would really want to support something like that in an environmentally sensitive area for commercialization. That's my opinion.
Well, I would like to see something in the transient activity ordinance that goes right back to the approved site plan or whatever, to double check to make sure that whatever a person is requesting on their property has not previously been a condition of the approval, so that we aren't getting into a quagmire and that we are approving something that we already said you can't do. That's what, the addition that I would like to see. I do think that, you know, we do have a couple things that are different. I listened to the suggestion of maybe we just don't do it in residential areas, but that's gonna kick out Mount Holiday, and I don't think we can do that. I will say that there was a wedding reception on the property across the street from me this weekend. I don't know where those people parked, because there was no problem on my street, but their driveway, their whole yard was full of tents, so I don't know how they got there, but they magically appeared.
Magic bus.
But it was no problem. It was absolutely no problem for the neighbors for that wedding reception. So I do know that we did look at this after a huge problem at the Iceman and the parking, and the ambulances couldn't get in there, and it was just a mess. And the changes we made at that time were associated with notifying the police and the ambulance and making sure that parking made sense. And that's why now there's no parking on Hammond Road. Everybody got kicked off and that kind of thing. So I think we've made some changes to this since it was originally approved, but they might have just been, not actually ordinance revisions, but just the way that we process the permit itself. But I do think that if we say no to something, I don't think that we should be able to get a transient activity ordinance or a special use ordinance that changes what the approval was in the first place.
I agree with that.
100%.
So, yeah, that makes sense. One question for you, and I know that one of the recommendations for edits to the transient activity permit would be not to allow for anything that's not allowed in zoning. And so that gets into a little bit of a challenge because you've got Mount Holiday that is not, they're not a event venue. You've got Timber Ridge that's in natural area, so they're not a event venue. So I guess that, I wonder if there'd be a possibility or a way of making a differentiation between like the specific site plan review conditions versus, a lot of these, and in talking with other communities, oftentimes the special event is kind of seen as not necessarily permitting that as a land use, but allowing that as an event to occur at some frequency. So just wanted to get thoughts from the Planning Commission on that.
Out of zoning and putting in police power?
Yeah, but there was a comment that we shouldn't allow something that is in conflict with the site plan approval, but to me, like zoning is also in conflict with the site plan approval. Do you know what I mean? Or does that sound like two different items?
Well, can we specify, and this is totally a question because I don't know the answer. Can we specify those two particular properties and uses differently? Since they are non-conforming uses in zoning districts that have been allowed for years, and still allow those special activities at those properties because of that's more in line with the things that they can host.
Yeah, we can, if that's the desire of the Planning Commission, we can definitely look at policy options for that. That would be closing the door to other venues to have some type of a community event in the future. So we do.
But if we did that, then we could say it can't be in residential areas, right? Except for
Unless it's in your permit. Or your list of uses.
For these specific properties. I don't know, I'm grasping, I think.
Well,
I
if
hear-
you
I'm
do
with-
just those specific properties, are you setting a precedent? Then we do have to let something like a boat photo shoot come back.
Not necessarily.
Necessarily, okay.
Yeah, I think it's a policy decision by the
Thank you.
Planning
Okay.
Commission.
Thanks for clarifying.
So if you get rid of the wedding, the stuff at Camp Graylick, and you only have the stuff that's, like on commercial property, the Christmas tree sales, or the commercial property of Timber Ridge and Mount Holiday, you're only left with a couple of things. You're talking about, a 5K race and the Land Conservancy is what's left. Again, the Land Conservancy may be considered a commercial use, I'm not sure, but,
Let me throw out a hypothetical. This is a question. I have no answer. Let's say for our purposes that we get lots of ice, as we did some years ago. East Bay, God bless it, freezes over. One of the hotels decides that they're going to be the sponsor of some type of event, whether it be ice boating or, and I saw hundreds of people during the heavy freeze running across East Bay, and I just thought to myself, keep the Coast Guard informed. But, and they did, but How would that fit into this?
That would be probably a candidate for a special event.
No, it would be.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, is that because now you're saying there's this community benefit type piece? I mean, how does that all fit together? You know, and I can see regulating things on the inner lakes, but then when you get to East Bay, that covers a whole different territory and multiple, you know, jurisdictions.
So are you thinking like somebody wants to do, one of the hotels wants to do an ice carnival or something?
Yeah.
Because it's frozen over? Yeah, how would we? It would just be a,
I'm just saying, just, you know,
Permit.
thinking about something like that, how would that fit under what we are proposing, or do we need to consider something else?
Is the problem that we're trying to address the fact that, like, that we've had a couple different land users utilize their property outside of what, something we all, at one point in time, determined wasn't supposed to happen effectively. The rest of these, you know, I just kind of feel like they've kind of done their job, meaning they've applied for a permit, it's out of the usual from what they would normally do, they complied with the rules. Even, let's take, for example, the Iceman, you know, maybe they had some issue, but they learn each year. Or we tweak and we work with them and we come to consensus. Are we making a mountain out of a molehill is what I'm saying here? Is there a way to make a simple adjustment to?
I mean, from what I'm hearing
take the
is
next-
that all of the events that are listed are appropriate with the exception of a couple of them. And so I think some minor tweaks to the ordinance could change that without closing the door to other types of community events that are looking to locate in the township. I think the other thing, and I think Brian had mentioned this to me a few years ago when I talked with him about the transient activity ordinance, is we could have a special event ordinance, and then we could have like a peddler's license ordinance, and that would be something where we'd permit Christmas trees and those types of things, because those look like quite a bit different than, so it's hard to have an ordinance that applies to everything when you're selling Christmas trees for a month and a half versus having, you know, hosting the Iceman. So I think, at least from my perspective, making some tweaks to this transient activity ordinance, but have it be more of like a special event ordinance and take into, I appreciate, Paul, all of your comments and others. We can take a look at some of those items. And to me, again, those are tweaks. And then have a separate ordinance for peddler's license. And so then that would be kind of two different things that then we wouldn't be having these kind of weird circumstances, whereas this transient activity, like, it's certainly not a special event. It's easier to tell, is it a special event or is it not a special event?
Right.
So,
I like that idea.
just based on what I'm hearing, and Dan, I think that's a good comment. I don't think we want to, I think if we have something that's generally working for most of our events, we want to
Feels like
keep
it
it,
anyway.
make some minor modifications. I know, Peninsula Township, they do have, it's and you could probably speak more to the actual administration, but it's a pretty involved process. It involves township board meeting for the special events and township board approval and
It's evolved.
Yeah. So again, that's staff time and that's, additional fees that are incurred, but it's something we could look at if the ordinance isn't working for our special events.
The only comment I would make to that is if you get above 500, 1,000 participants, not a bad idea.
Second Iceman?
When you're inundated and in their situation, half of the community's shut down physically, you do want to get comments from folks, and that did uncover some ways to make it better.
Yeah, yep, that's a good point.
Well,
Yeah,
like
so you-
like the wine tasting that they have day after Thanksgiving.
I mean, you could also make the application process more rigorous if you meet a threshold. If it's 1,000, you got to have a parking plan, you have to have a road closure plan.
Yeah.
Or things like that, whereas if it's, I hate to put too many breaks in it, but maybe 500 and 1,000 or something are reasonable things, I don't know.
Couldn't we tie that back into the size of the property?
Yeah, I think the size of the
I thought that was a
property.
good suggestion, because
Yeah.
then that takes care of us figuring out, I mean, I don't know how we come up with that. How did they,
There was, in Acme Township, they have a
Table.
table, so
They have
it's
a
X
table
number of
already.
acres, this many, you know.
yeah, so if we did something like that, then we wouldn't have to.
But if you look at the Iceman right now, right, they have figured out a way to park cars at Cortade, and they've parked cars at the Cortade Farm, and so even though, I mean, Timber Ridge is a very large parcel in the front, but they're not putting the people on that parcel, they are bringing people to and from. So I'm concerned about that for some of the already known activities that happen, and how that's gonna affect them in the future. That's my,
I mean, the size of the parcel, yeah.
Well, how
I can see
many
that.
people does the Iceman?
Well, I did check.
5,000.
and,
6,000.
yeah, The size of
How
the
many?
parcel.
6,000 plus?
Huge.
The size, the 80 acres that Timber Ridge has is too small, based on Acme's table, would be too small for that type
so
of
I'm just
event.
concerned about that whole, and maybe it's, this is the normal, but if you have something larger, then we have to see your parking plan and your, like you just suggested. So maybe it's still something we can do, it's just,
Just with numbers.
I just don't want to, you know, it's been working for that specific event, so
Right.
what, do we need to change it for that event, or?
I wouldn't want to.
Or just a new created event. Like you said, it would come in front of the board if it were greater than 500 or 1,000, whatever, based on parcel size, whatever, you know, little chart we want to use. Maybe not the one from Acme if Iceman won't fit in that, but, you know, maybe for some of these new events that come, so we're not behind the 8 ball trying to get back in front of it, like Peninsula Township did.
Could we start with some small changes first to maybe alleviate the existing concern? And then maybe if Peter or Brian's here, we can noodle on it with them live. Because then, you know, we could go down, we could keep spiraling into this vortex for a while, I bet, but.
I think it's generally been working, and I think that
Yeah.
there's a few tweaks that we can make
Right now.
very quickly to make it work even better. And that if there is a problem with something that, you know, maybe the tweak that we put in is that at any time, you know, the zoning department can bring it to the township planning commissioner board, you know,
Revisit it.
yeah. For any activity, so if there's an activity that, you know, comes up and our team is like, wait a second, I don't feel right on this,
Flaming axe throwing.
for those under 18.
Oh, don't get me started. You should see my living room.
Oh, my goodness.
It's wild.
And did you
I hear ya.
say that you said a lot of people changed changed it to special events or something like that versus?
I just
transient?
noticed that most other communities call it special events, which is more
I
what
kind of
the.
like that. I don't know.
It's a little bit
I've
less
never liked
confusing.
I think the
word
title
transient.
fits.
It's weird. It's just like, I don't know. Special event to me says more like what it is. But that's just me.
It sounds like an easy change to make.
Well, and it just, if it's consistent with others, I think people, you know, that visit different events come to East Bay and ours is labeled different. I think it's just, it should be more consistent.
Have we beat the horse?
Yep, thank you. That's very helpful
Good stuff.
guidance, and we will,
Call the glue guy.
we'll get moving on that. Thank you.
Okay, last on the docket, regional business district signs and billboard regulations. Another policy discussion, please.
Yeah, so, for the signs, as you'll recall, earlier this spring, it might have been at the same meeting, I can't remember, but we brought forth a number of policy discussion topics associated with the zoning ordinance rewrite, one of which was the sign and billboard regulations along US 31 in the regional business district. So the new draft ordinance that we've got public hearing scheduled for October includes several proposed changes to the sign standards In particular, really just making sure that they're all content neutral, they're in line with Reed versus Gilbert. But it did not make significant changes to regional business district, which is where we have most of our signs. And reason behind that was just really wanting to take a closer look at, have it be informed by our beach district visioning effort. So we have collected significant amount of public input throughout the past 5 to 6 months. The purpose of tonight's discussion is to provide staff with kind of general policy direction about desired signage in the regional business district. And you'll see, we did send out a public survey. It was conducted to better understand visual preferences for signage along the corridor. As well, we had a lot of other topics on the survey, but I included in your packet just the results related to the corridor signage. So we had 89 responses. They were represented corridor business owners, stakeholders, as well as members of the general public. Overall, we saw a preference for the monument-style signage along the corridor. So that's like the lower signage. You're seeing a lot of communities that are kind of slowly transitioning to that monument-style signage. So did want to just kind of review some of our current standards, ordinance standards, as they appear in the draft ordinance. And really, the draft ordinance is very similar to the current ordinance because we didn't make many changes. So in the regional business district, signs are, if they're freestanding, kind of out in front of the business, they can be 120 square feet. We kept that as is. The height, right now, as drafted, and I think that this was just drafted by our consultants because they're in Southeast Michigan, they're really only dealing with monument signs, and that's what a lot of communities are moving towards. So right now, as drafted, they're saying they've got 8 feet maximum for signage of the freestanding business signs. And then only allowing 1/3 of the area to have electronic display or illumination. So right now, our height is 20 feet maximum for our signage, and so this would reduce it down to 8 feet. Looking at billboards, and we've got separate standards for billboards. So right now, we've got, as drafted, a maximum of 75 square feet for billboards. We've got a height of 20 feet, the maximum height of 20 feet for billboards. And then we've got kind of a continuation of what our current ordinance allows for, which is they have to be at least 300 feet from a residential use. If they're illuminated, they would need to remain static for 30 seconds. And then the distance spacing requirement, maximum of 2 per linear mile and 1,000-foot separation minimum. So I spent some time looking at our existing signage. So this is looking at just kind of the on-site signs. In terms of height, there's considerable variability in current signage along the corridor, but there's a lot of tall signs. So the vast majority, if not all, exceed that 8 feet as drafted in the current ordinance. So some examples, they mostly range in height from about 15 to 20 feet. The Days Inn is 20 feet. Green Mitt, recently done. It's kind of a nice looking, it's tall, but it's a kind of resembling a monument sign, is 14 feet. Dairy Queen is 20 feet. Pirates Cove is 18 feet. Red Mesa, again, doesn't look super high, but that's 15 feet. Park Shore is 15 feet. Hampton Inn is 20 feet. So I did look at, like, Garfield Township, for example. They have a maximum height of 10 feet for monument signs. So I think if we are going to require all the freestanding signs to be monument, we would want to look at maybe 10 to 12 feet as opposed to 8 feet. I think 8 feet is really short, would be my recommendation, but would be curious to your guidance. Garfield also allows for up to 20 feet if it's a pylon sign, which is like multiple businesses stacked on top of each other. That's kind of their only, the only opportunity for the higher one, if it's multiple businesses.
Do we have many of those?
Do we?
The
We
one
have
in the corner,
few.
3 Mile, yeah.
We've got the one at 4 Mile.
Einstein Cycles, one
Yeah.
of those in that plaza.
There's that one also just before the Bear Store going
Is there
east.
kind of a difference between,
We don't differentiate in our current ordinance on those.
I feel like we'd have to if we change,
Yeah, yeah.
can't get all of that in 8 feet.
Yeah. There's also considerable variability in the size of the signs along the corridor. So like so right now we allow up to 120 square feet. The Alexandra Inn, just recently done, is 108 feet. That's a shorter sign, but still 108 square feet. Hopscotch is 75 square feet. Don's Drive-In is 100 square feet. Looking at other communities, Garfield Township allows 60 to 100 square feet, depending on the district. There's a lot of other townships that are quite a bit smaller. Shelby Township limits signs to like 40 to 75 square feet. Farmington Hills is 64. Bloomfield Hills is 32. So I think there is an opportunity to reduce it from 120. And especially if we're looking at monument signs, it might be more appropriate to allow like 100 square foot signs, 80 to 100 square foot. Again, just curious your thoughts, but that's my perspective just from looking at the results of our public engagement as well as what's working well in other communities. So transitioning over to billboards. So East Bay Township currently has 3 billboards. The heights range from 20 feet to approximately 30 feet in height.
What's the one by the Bear Company? Is that the 30-footer?
That one looked to me about 30 feet, and that was just based on my measuring from our imagery. The one that's furthest east, near Burger King, looked like it was about 20 feet.
So do those get grandfathered in? Or does everybody that's,
Everything existing would be grandfathered in.
because I was like,
Yeah.
almost everything would be out of control.
Yeah. So the size of the current billboards range from approximately 200 square feet up to 300 square feet of those 3 billboards. Looking at surrounding communities, billboard maximum sizes are closer to the 200 to 300 square foot range. And you'll see, we took a look at Long Lake, Acme, Green Lake, Whitewater, Bayfield, Grant. Basically, all of the other townships in East Bay, their billboard allowances are closer to that 200 to 300 square foot range. Peninsula Township and Traverse City are outliers. Peninsula allows for 30 square feet, Traverse City is 20 to 40.
How are those even considered billboards?
Yeah, I don't know. Where are Peninsula Township's billboards?
Plead the fifth.
Okay. In Traverse City, I think their billboards are larger, but they're probably pre-existing, the ones that I've seen in Traverse City. So I guess two things I wanted to note related to billboards. One is just that a lot of communities limit billboards to like certain commercial districts that are outside of like the heavier commercial category. Corridors. I noticed both Acme and Garfield do that. One challenge with East Bay is like, we don't really have like a state highway that's kind of undeveloped outside of our state highway commercial district is really US 31. So our state highway that's kind of what we've got and kind of where you would generally see billboards. From a technology standpoint, there are emerging technologies that the Planning Commission may wish to take into consideration when drafting the ordinance standards. While electronic display is often desired by businesses, you're seeing more and more electronic display. It can be negatively perceived by surrounding residents. There are new technologies that allow electronic message boards to be limited to like a certain field of vision and buffer it from adjacent properties. So when you're like coming up on it, it's like you see it, and it's really only when you're kind of driving along the road and you're not seeing it like in a property residential across the street or hotels. I did include a link, so this was provided to us by Lamar, and I think the video is helpful. I included that video as a link just in your packet. So I guess tonight, I'm really just looking for kind of big picture policy guidance. I don't know if we need to get into all the details and, but just looking for me to go back to our consultants that are helping us draft the ordinance and just provide some guidance. And so I was looking for some guidance. I put together a few prompting questions. So based on the current development patterns, what neighboring communities are looking at, and the public input that we've received, do you believe that the standards as drafted in our ordinance are appropriate? And are there certain areas where they should be, from your perspective, adjusted? And so the current standards as drafted, you'll see are in this table on page 44 of the memo.
Well, I think
The
with this,
packet.
from this, oh, go ahead, Rhonda.
Oh, I was just going to start going down the first table, and the first thing that appears would be the size, the freestanding size. We've got 120 square feet, but in the conversation that you just went through, you're recommending maybe 80 to 100 might be more appropriate.
Or was that for the billboards?
No, that's for the signs, the on-site signs.
How big did you say Alexandria was?
108.
108. That's pretty new.
That's a long name.
I want to put my screen up there.
I think it's funny that it's called the Alexandria. Why would we make those bigger than the billboards?
Alexandra.
Yes, I always add the I, sorry.
Yeah, I've been corrected.
Do you guys
Alexandra, I
think that it's
apologize.
weird that our monument signs are bigger than the billboards?
No.
I mean, shouldn't it be the opposite?
Yeah, but no.
It's because you're
Yeah, but no.
stacking multiples.
Yeah, you have multiples, but also, I mean, you're advertising a business rather than a billboard.
so
I'm just
monument, you're
not a fan
saying-
of billboards, I guess.
So are you saying this first category are the ones that are multiple signs?
Or like
No,
your
those are
business
just
signs,
any
yeah.
business sign.
Any business sign.
Yeah.
Does that include the multiple ones? Or are they separate?
That would include them. So we could regulate them separately.
Well, I didn't think you have to. Because I think it's weird, that's just to me, to have, let's say, just one sign, you know, like the picture in here, and it can be 120 square feet, but our billboard can only be 75. Is that weird?
Yeah, so I think we could take a look at regulating like the pylons that have multiple businesses
they have to.
differently in terms of square footage and height, different from like a monument sign for a new business that's going in.
Right, because otherwise, if,
So if we're talking on the first one for monument signs, right? So anybody have a preference? What do you think is appropriate? 80, 100?
100.
Heard.
100 seems reasonable.
Okay.
I'm just thinking, I'm trying to imagine, I mean, the vision that might be emerging for the regional business district through the visioning session would be something where the speeds on US 31 would not be quite as fast. I mean, that's, a lot of the public feedback, at least, was that, that was a detriment. And I'm wondering what, if you're going to advertise multiple businesses in 100 square feet, it could be hard to see, even at 35, when people drive 55 now, roughly. I'm just trying to, yeah, so I think you almost have to do it differently with the
Yeah.
multiple businesses, and I don't know how you write that into the ordinance, but,
No, I think that makes sense.
yeah.
Because I like the example that you had, or that they had in the survey, where they showed a couple different options of what that would look like.
right.
So the monument could be 100, and the pylon signs, multiple businesses, would be maybe up to 20 feet in height and larger square footage.
I mean, I would think some distinction like that, yeah, would be reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
Because, yeah, Carl, I'm looking at the page 49, with the 2 on there.
Yep.
I don't know how big that is, but I'm thinking of a bigger version of that,
Yes.
I guess.
Which I think is what's shown on page 47, right, under question 9?
That's not nearly as tall.
Yeah.
Right, the difference, that's what he's saying, yeah.
Right.
He's envisioning more
Right,
of
not,
this.
yeah, more low, not so,
But we do have
Gas station-ish.
plazas that have multiple businesses, right?
Right.
So,
Well, this
There
is
would be a few.
multiple business.
Both of them are multiple business.
Yeah. So back last time we looked at the sign ordinance, one of the issues that came up a lot was the fact that there are so many existing signs, and they are large, and to put a sign up and decrease the size so much, you're never gonna see that sign because that big one is always gonna be there. Even if they re-skin it or whatever, that sign is always gonna be there. So that's one of the reasons that if I remember correctly, that the size stayed pretty large was because they're already there and they're not going anywhere.
Unless the property's redeveloped.
No, because they can still use the skin of the sign. They can still use that sign.
Not the way our new ordinance is drafted.
Okay.
But I do think maybe moving,
100 right now?
No.
there's quite a few, I think, yeah. So I think moving from 120 to 100 makes more sense than going from like 120 to 60 or 40 or some of the other like downstate communities
Yep.
that we see.
Okay.
I like the lower 2 portion rather than the 20-footers, personally.
So maybe if it's a single business,
Yeah.
10 or 12-foot maximum,
Yeah,
height maximum.
20 is too high.
What?
20 is too high.
Yeah, I think 8 is too low, though, just
8
from
is
what I'm
too low.
seeing in other communities.
But
Okay.
I think I'd be happy with 10 or 12, so I'll say 12.
Okay.
How big is the big square? You know, the big green square one? That one?
That's the one I was,
That one's probably about 15 or
Okay.
so. It's,
It's all a reference of what we all drive by, but
Right, no,
I think that one's a little out of scale.
There's a big red one that I keep seeing in my head, and I can't remember what business it is, but it's freaking huge.
I wish I could share my screen.
The beach district?
I'm driving down it right now.
I'm thinking it's the party store that's next to Red.
Bayside Market.
Is that sign huge?
It's large, but I would say it's consistent with other
I was gonna say, that I
signs.
don't remember it feeling out
It is
of
large, but it
ordinary.
doesn't stand out.
We were just
Yeah,
there.
because you've got Renisa at 15 feet there next to it.
Yeah.
I think Bayside Market is huge in my brain.
Oh.
I think that seems reasonable. 112, or 100,
100, and then 12 foot.
yeah, and 12 feet,
12
yeah.
feet, yeah.
I mean, I guess the idea is that you would, over time, reduce the scale of the visual assault, you know, with properties being redeveloped. We have enough visual clutter up high
Right.
with all the utilities.
Just the whole purpose of also reducing the billboards.
Yeah.
People don't like looking at billboards anymore.
So is there a technology on billboards that make them dark sky compliant?
There is, that's my understanding, yeah.
I know that when that one came online next to Burger King, it lit up the world, but they had to adjust it afterwards.
Okay.
So is that something?
Yeah, and I mean, part of that is whether, like illuminated versus digital, like illumination, you can have it, you know, facing down versus facing up. And then with digital, there, you know, are mechanisms in place to make sure that they meet light candle requirements and. So I'm curious, just for guidance on the on the billboard requirements, because as you know, in our current ordinance, it's like 75 square feet if it's 45 miles an hour or less, and then it's, I can't remember whether it's 200 or 300, but quite large if it's over 45 miles per hour, but that, none of our corridor is that speed. So just curious your thoughts on that based on looking at other communities, the size of the billboards, the fact that we would only have a maximum of 3 billboards in the township. You know, they're not, it's not based on our distance and spacing requirements. We're not going to have more billboards in the future, but curious if you think it would be appropriate to increase the size to be more consistent with other townships.
I have a hard time comparing it to other townships when we've done surveys for along that district and people want us reduced.
Yeah, it's like 80%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
the feedback.
so when it comes to other townships, it's like, that's fine.
Yeah.
It works for them, but based on what the studies have shown in our section, people want it smaller.
You know, with the technology that's out there, sooner or later, they're going to be obsolete. I just looked at a new car, and not mine, but you say, you can ask, you know, tell me where Italian restaurants are, and, or, you know, show me this, and it gives you a whole list. You press on it, and then it shows you how to get there. So it, you know, not now, not today, but it's coming. That eventually I can see all the ads in your car
Or in your glasses.
or in your glasses. But it's, the technology that they're putting in there right now is fabulous.
I think that the billboards have always, it's not so much of, it's stuff that sticks in your mind. I mean, obviously, you see it enough, you drive by it every single day, and it's forefront in the front of your mind. So I think, you know, obviously, that's been the purpose. I don't think it's how to get to the store or whatever, but it's just, I mean, that's why real estate agents do it. It doesn't bring them a lick of business, but forefront of the mind. It's like, oh, hey, I know that person, or I've seen that person, or whatever. So it's just that repetition, so, I don't know.
Does our current ordinance, does it have a remain static thing currently?
It can change every 30 seconds.
Okay. Oh, in the current ordinance, okay.
Yeah.
So what you're asking now is the height, correct?
Looking for some guidance on the
Guidance
height.
there.
Right now, as drafted, it's 20 feet
20,
in height,
right.
which I think is reasonable.
And then the current size ranges from 200 to 300.
Of other communities and in our
Yep.
township.
Mhm. So 20 feet, does everybody think that would be reasonable?
I don't know. Claire, you made a mention about the green mitt, and that to me almost functions like a normal large billboard. It rolls a message periodically. Hey, go wash your car, or what have you. But I think it kind of functions the same, and that is not 20 feet high. Like that thing maybe 12, 15, I'm totally guessing. But,
I think I've got it in here.
oh, you've got it at 14.
14 feet.
So that's why I'm just kind of also thinking, like, all of the survey data said they wanted it lower and smaller, like all of it. So, again, I'm with Steve on, like, let's just listen,
What's the
on reducing.
footage of that green mitt?
Of the sign? I could get back with you, I'm not sure. Our permitting system is down right now, so it was hard to go back through past permits, and I was able to track down some of them, but everything that was approved through Epic was not available to review.
So Dan, with the survey data, sounds like maybe 20 needs to go down to 15 or so, if Green Mitt, if you're thinking that's like a
that's-
good example, would that be, that's 14, so 15 is a fair number.
I agree.
Then what about square
And part of
footage?
another consideration is just that billboards are generally co-located on a site with a sign, and so they're oftentimes like above the building and other signage. So there could be confusion just with,
Does Green Mitt have other signage? I'm trying to think. They just have the one.
I agree that we just follow the public survey, lower and smaller.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like we can approve too many new ones anyway.
Right.
So,
Right.
this is,
okay. Okay,
My only,
well, that's helpful.
my only thought is that if we're going 80 to 100 on the freestanding, I think that the size should be exactly the same.
I can get on board with that.
Can you see that?
I can.
What is that?
The green.
Green mat. So that's 14 feet? Right.
Yeah.
that's 14 feet? Seems shorter.
You have what you need?
Anything bigger than that?
Do you have what you need? 15 feet, and then what?
15, and
I agree with the consistency.
Yeah. Because then you have that lower sign for the business itself, and then somewhere else on the property that it could potentially be something slightly higher.
On the building.
It
On
just
a
needs to
billboard,
rest in
that's
the
same
business
size.
owners. I mean, if they want two signs, they've got to figure that out.
Yeah.
I don't think
so I
that's
hear
best.
115. 100 is
100
size, and 15 is the height.
Wait, where'd that come from?
Where'd the
Thought you were trying to do like an auction.
Okay. Well, that was all that I had for the sign policy discussion, so we'll take that back to Giffords Webster, and it's not going to be incorporated in the current draft, but it will be an amendment. It'll be one of our first amendments that we'll take a look at.
Okay.
Okay.
Then that brings us to agenda number, letter D, which is appointment of chair, vice chair, and secretary. Does anybody want to fill the seat?
I'd like to make a motion to keep the three current people in their seat. Can I do
As
that?
long as you guys are willing,
If you're
I
willing.
second that.
I just think you're doing a great job, I really do, and
Yep.
I don't want the job. Just putting it out there.
You're doing so well.
No, I do.
I'm happy where I'm at, let's just say that.
Great. I think you guys are doing a great job.
Okay,
We need a vote.
we need a vote. Was that a motion by
That was a motion. This is kind of a
Renee,
rough one, but.
supported by Mindy?
Specific?
Leave everybody in the same seats.
Yes.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
You're all welcome.
Public comment round 2. Come on up if you got anything else you'd like to follow up on.
I'd like to follow up on Commissioner Leonard's suggestion to start small, which I think is a good suggestion. This is regarding the amendments to the transient business ordinance. I think there's 2 small tweaks that you could make in this ordinance that would address kind of what the concerns I had. One is, Section 1 already provides, this is sort of the preamble for the ordinance, says, one of the things we're looking at is can provide important benefits to the residents of the community. This is the whole purpose of this ordinance. Why not take that language and insert it into the requirements so that when the administrator reviews the application, they need to make a determination that the activity can provide important benefits to the residents of the community. So that addresses that concern. The other is, and I think Claire made a good point, inherently, a lot of these activities are kind of sideways with zoning. I mean, they're not really specifically permitted. But the ordinance says, well, okay, we'll allow these activities as long as, public health and safety is addressed, traffic, these types of things, and that's why you have this permit process. We had suggested a small amendment, though, that you specifically provide that whatever is approved is not violative of specific conditions to a site plan approval, special land use permit approval, or a PUD. So, and that makes sense. So remove the reference to compliance with zoning. Okay, put that aside. But make sure that whatever is approved is not directly contrary to specific conditions that the Planning Commission has imposed upon site plan approval, PUD, special land use permit, or whatever. And I think that would kind of address those two concerns without popping the hood on the whole ordinance and diving into it in a deep manner. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, Brandon Flensky, East Bay Township President. If I heard correctly at the onset of the meeting, there was discussion regarding change in policy of the correspondence and how that will be addressed in regards to packets. Couple things to note, if that is in fact a new policy change that will be taken into account, Township website will need to be addressed and updated to reflect that change. Currently, it says that emails received will be part of correspondence and meeting packet according to the following schedule in the upcoming meeting packet if submitted prior to distribution of the packet, in a subsequent packet for the upcoming meeting if submitted after the packet distribution but before noon the day of the meeting, if you guys caught that, and then in the next month's packet if submitted after noon the day of the meeting. So let's please address all of that together. Another consideration I would have is that Parks Commission, Board of Trustees, Planning Commission, ZBA, each of those groups handle their correspondence a little bit differently, and it would be great from a resident's perspective, to get an acknowledgement of that's been received, because not all of those groups are doing that, and then B, if in fact the correspondence won't be included in the packets, I think it may have the unintended consequence on the length of your meetings, that you will find more people at this podium reading the things that they've already sent to you for the benefit of the greater public. So just some things to think about. I totally understand, I believe I understand where this policy change may be coming from, but just thinking about all the consequences that could come, good and bad, from it. So thank you all for your work. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Brandon. Okay. Feels like we're going to wrap up public comment number 2. Any consideration of future agenda items we need to be aware of? Anything out there?
Nope, just a note that we don't have a special meeting this month, first time in several months. So thanks to the Planning Commission for sticking with us for quite a few heavy load meeting months.
And our next upcoming meeting date is Tuesday, October 1st at 6:30, a regular meeting. And then in November, it's coming soon, we'll be switching that to November 7th, which is a Thursday, which is a little different. So just as FYI. With that, thanks everybody, and we're adjourned.